Glad to see all of you today. Hare Krishna. First, we'll start with reading the translations to Divinity and Divine Service. That's the second chapter of the Bhagavatam. We read the Sanskrit the other day.
This session is no longer being recorded.
Ugrashava, Sutta Goswami, the son of Romaharshan, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, together please, thanked them and thus attempted to reply. Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Shukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son!' Indeed, only the trees, which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation, echoed in response to the bereaved father. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggled to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of fortune, learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna, and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. O best among the twice-born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. As soon as a revocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes completely happy. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruit of actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. Certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood. And fire is still better, for by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas, but goodness, sattva, is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. Previously, all the great sages rendered service unto the personality of Godhead due to his existence above the three modes of material nature. They worshipped him to become free from material conditions and thus derive the ultimate benefit. Whoever follows such great authorities is also eligible for liberation from the material world. Those who are serious about liberation are certainly non-envious, and they respect all. Yet they reject the horrible and ghastly forms of the demigods and worship only the all-blissful forms of Lord Vishnu and his plenary portions. In the revealed scriptures, the ultimate object of knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The purpose of performing sacrifices is to please him. Yoga is for realizing him. All fruitive activities are ultimately rewarded by him only. He is supreme knowledge, and all severe austerities are performed to know him. Religion, dharma, is rendering loving service unto him. He is the supreme goal of life. In the beginning of the material creation, that absolute personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, in his transcendental position, created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy. After creating the material substance, the Lord, Vasudeva, expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. The Lord as Supersoul pervades all things, just as fire permeates wood. And so he appears to be of many varieties, though he is the absolute one without a second. The Supersoul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Thus the Lord of the universes maintains all planets inhabited by demigods, men, and lower animals. Assuming the roles of incarnations, he performs pastimes to reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. Translation to chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, please. So we chanted the Sanskrit to these verses the other day. And now read the English, and if one continuously goes through the various chapters of the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and recites them on a regular basis, one's mind will become fascinated. That is, the word fascinated means to be fastened to something. And there are many things the mind can become fastened to. It's its propensity to fasten itself to other things. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Jayato vishayam pumsang sangasteshu pajayate. Saanga means that one makes a connection or fastens. So when the mind thinks about the objects of the senses in the material world and contemplates them, then it fastens itself. In fact, the sense objects are already fastened to the mind, even as we're born in this world. The Hamsa Avatar explains this in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the sense objects are embedded in the mind, and the mind is embedded in the sense objects. And therefore, we already have a fascination with the material world, but it's not satisfying. So the object of this sadhana of hearing and chanting is to fasten the mind to the Shastra. So if you can fasten your mind to the Srimad Bhagavatam, then your mind becomes liberated. Tada rajas tamopava kama loba dayaschaye cheta iter anavidham stitam sattve prasidati. This is the cheta iter anavidham stitam sattve prasidati. The mind will gradually be transformed from a materialistic entity into one that's situated in Shuddha Sattva. And when one's mind is situated in Shuddha Sattva, then one will naturally be able to perceive Krishna. He's already there, everywhere, but I can't see him because I'm covered over. So this exercise of repeating the Shastra and becoming attached to it and having one's mind form a bond with this transcendental sound liberates one from the material world. Shuddha Sattva. Okay, translations to chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. And this is a regular daily practice that anyone who's serious in spiritual life should adhere to. That is, recite at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day before the sun goes down. And if you can do that every single day, then you will naturally advance in the process of devotional service. And if you don't, you'll waste a great opportunity. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, altogether, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Who is the Lord of sacrifice? And how does he live in the body, O Madhusudan? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruit of activities. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature which is constantly changing is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of sacrifice. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. One who at the time of death fixes his life air between the eyebrows, and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkara, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pratha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state, and thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest again. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are hopelessly annihilated. Yet there is another unmanifest nature, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. That which the Vedantas describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. O best of the Paratas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery God, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. According to Vedic opinion, there are 2 ways of passing from this world, one in light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. Although the devotees know these 2 paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, by performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme and eternal abode. You find Rukmini's, the chapter where Rukmini offers prayers. The whole chapter? Did any of the verses that we just read stick to your mind, or your mind stick to them? Did you become attached to any of the verses? Did you take shelter of any of them? Did you think, oh, this verse is speaking directly to me? If so, which one was it? Yes? Here comes the mic.
So the first word, it says there are 2 paths, light and darkness, but devotees are never bewildered. Because it's very difficult practically to think so many things. So just take the shelter and be assured that you are safe.
Very nice. Why did you think of that verse? What struck you about it?
Because our life is complicated, at least in IT. So I don't feel that so many rituals, so many things is difficult. Krishna consciousness is simple and sublime. That's why it is so easily we can accept it and but get the highest benefit at the same time. I think that is why I like it.
Nice points. Very nice. Anybody else have a verse that stuck? Bali Mardan.
Kunda sada tadbhava bhavita. This is a beautiful verse. Whoever remembers whatever at the time of quitting his body, he attains to that state.
Yeah, so why did you remember that verse? Why did that stick to your mind?
Yeah, the reason is we are always conscious and we
I'm not
must...
asking about we, I'm asking about why it stuck to you.
Yeah, it stuck to me because when I'm thinking of something else, then I remember in case if I quit my body, then I will attain. So I bring back to some Krishna consciousness activity. So that gives me an impetus to remember.
So if I understand you correctly, as you're moving about the world, you remember this verse because you become aware of the fact that you could die at any minute.
Any minute.
And you want to be very deliberate about what you're thinking about when you die. Is that correct?
That's true.
Okay. It's very practical, good points. Yes?
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I think last Saturday someone asked you this question about in this life going back home, back to Godhead, and then you, in the answer you mentioned the words from this chapter, Nate Sriti Parthe Jana.
They asked in one life, can we go back to God?
In one life he can go back.
Said in one life you will.
So you quoted the words from this chapter, Nate Sriti Parthe Jana Yogi Muhyati Kashyana Tasmat Sarvir. So that a Krishna conscious person, he doesn't depend on the ordinary activities or like day, night or anything. He's above also. That verse always and it stuck to my mind.
It depends on Krishna, and also, as I was listening to a lecture of Prabhupada this morning, and he was saying that the devotee depends on the order of the spiritual master, and that he's not even concerned with liberation. He's concerned with following the order of the spiritual master, and whatever comes of that, na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam ja va jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhakti rahaitu ki tvai. Lord Chaitanya says that life after life, I just go on performing service. But it's up to Krishna whatever he does with me. And the devotee is satisfied whatever situation Krishna puts him in, because he's only concerned with going on with his service. Narayana parak sarve na kutaschana bibhyati swarga pavarga narkeshu api tulyartha darshana. Tulyartha darshana means it's equal whether to the devotee, whether he's in Naraka or whether he's in Swarga, hell or heaven. Either way, as long as I'm connected with Krishna, then fine, I go on. He's not so concerned with this is where I want to go. But because he's connected to service, Vishvam Purnam Sukhayate, Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, even as he's in the material world, he sees this as the abode of joy, because he sees everything as connected to Krishna, because he's engaging everything in Krishna's service. I have a feeling I'm going to have to move in a second. Yeah. Shraddha? Oh, yes. This is like Stonehenge. The sun comes up right in the... Oh, that's worse. Well, don't move the Shastric team off the...
Shastric advice.
The Shastric advisory team, SAT. Can you move this back just a little? Thank you very much. Inconvenience is regretted. Yes, Shraddha, you were saying?
Maharaj, I like verse number 9, where there's a very nice and a beautiful description of how we should meditate on the Lord.
Oh.
And the Kavin Puranam.
Which particular way of meditating on him caught your attention?
I like the fact that in the end it says Aditya Varnam. And
Aditya Varnam.
Aditya Varnam is like golden in color, and that also reminds of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Oh, very nice. Excellent. So you can see how by reading these verses and contemplating them and reading the purports to them, going deeply within him, you have an inner life in Krishna consciousness. So the Shastra is the way that we transfer, Prabhupada writes this in his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, the way that we transfer our interests and our attention from the material world to the spiritual world. And if you want to transfer your attention to the material world, then there's plenty of ways to do that. There's lots of topics. As mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shotra Vyadini Rajendra, Nrinam Santi Sahasrashaha. This means Nrinam in human society, Santi Sahasrashaha means there's thousands and millions of topics in the material world that you can discuss. Doesn't mean that you should, but people do it anyway. And these don't pertain to the absolute truth. Therefore, they're simply a distraction, and they attach our mind to material things. And when that happens, then I become full of anxiety. Yes?
So, in relation to what Prabhu said in the beginning about, it's mentioned in this chapter, like, time of death, like if you die during the Uttarayan and when the sun is moving in the north, or during the light, then your death is glorious, you probably get born in a good... So when I went to India this time, so amongst my relatives, a relative had passed away, and I saw many people, like many other relatives discussing that she died in that right time where, the sun was in that northern part of the orbit and in the, I think, waxing moon that fortnight. So they don't know the other details, like what else Krishna had said, but they kept on saying, in Bhagavad Gita it is said that she died a very, her death is very auspicious, so she'll get a good birth. But they are not familiar with anything else, that who is saying Krishna. They're not discussing that, the other parts. While I was wondering, how it's said that, in the same chapter, like from Brahma's planet down to all the planets, it's again and again it's created, annihilated, and there is another abode, above all this, the Krishna's abode, which is never annihilated. So I was just thinking that I wish they knew all these details also, other than only that part of the whole Bhagavad Gita, that the death is glorious when. So just so that's...
What city are they in?
Calcutta.
So then you have to go to Calcutta and hold open classes in Calcutta. That's why it's so important to... And people have fragmentary knowledge of this and that. And especially Bhagavad Gita, in India people easily take it for granted. They say, I know Gita. And then they know one verse, even actually half a verse, and the half the verse they know, they misinterpret. And this is the plight of India. But if that's why it's so important to teach Bhagavad Gita. Vaita Acharya had open class every day, and he taught the Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is the greatest need in human society. And when you do that and people get complete knowledge, then they take to devotional service. And you see this all over the world. If you hold open class in your home, or you go to a school or wherever you go and you hold open class on Bhagavad Gita as it is, and people listen, then naturally the conclusion they come to is to dedicate their lives to Krishna, and then they become happy. So this is, the Krishna consciousness movement is a very simple thing. It means to teach Bhagavad Gita as it is to people everywhere. Most people, it takes them a while to be able to appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam, but right away they can appreciate Bhagavad Gita. Speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam, we're going to read the verses to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 52. Now we're looking right at the introduction, but perhaps we can look at the verses. And if you have it on verses only mode, apparently you do. Let's recite together. Shukadeva Goswami said, my dear king, thus graced by Lord Krishna, Muchukunda circumambulated him and bowed down to him. Then Muchukunda, the beloved descendant of Ikshvaku, exited through the mouth of the cave. Can't you have it on the mode where you just have verses? opposite. We're living in an opposite world here. Seeing the size of human beings, animals, trees, and plants had severely reduced, and thus realizing that the age of Kali was at hand, Muchukunda left for the north. The sober king, beyond material association and free of doubt, was convinced of the value of austerity. Absorbing his mind in Lord Krishna, he came to Gandhamandana mountain. There he arrived at Badarika Ashram, the abode of Lord Narayan, where, remaining tolerant of all dualities, he peacefully worshipped the Supreme Lord Hari by performing severe austerities. The Lord returned to Mathura, which was surrounded by Yavanas. Then he destroyed the army of barbarians and began taking their valuables to Dwarka. As the wealth was being carried by oxen and men under Lord Krishna's direction, Jarasandha appeared at the head of 23 armies. O king, seeing the fierce waves of the enemy's army, the two Madhavas, imitating human behavior, ran swiftly away. Abandoning the abundant riches, fearless but feigning fear, they went many yojanas on their lotus-like feet. When he saw them fleeing, powerful Jarasandha laughed loudly and then pursued them with charioteers and foot soldiers. He could not understand the exalted position of the two lords. Apparently exhausted after fleeing a long distance, the two lords climbed a high mountain named Pravarshana, upon which Lord Indra showered incessant rain. Although he knew they were hiding on the mountain, Jarasandha could find no trace of them. Therefore, O king, he placed firewood on all sides and set the mountain ablaze. The two of them suddenly jumped from the burning mountain, which was 11 yojanas high, and fell to the ground. Unseen by their opponent or his followers, O king, those two most exalted Yadus returned to their city of Dwarka, which had the ocean as a protective moat. Jarasandha, moreover, mistakenly thought that Balarama and Keshava had burned to death in the fire. Thus he withdrew his vast military force and returned to the Magadha kingdom. As ordered by Lord Brahma, Raivata, the opulent ruler of Anarta, gave Lord Balaram his daughter Raivati in marriage. This has already been discussed. O hero among the Kurus, the Supreme Lord himself, Govinda, married Bhishmaka's daughter, Vaidarbi, who is a direct expansion of the goddess of fortune. The Lord did this by her desire, and in the process he beat down Shalva and other kings who took Shishupal's side. Indeed, as everyone watched, Sri Krishna took Rukmini just as Garuda boldly stole nectar from the demigods. King Parikshit said, the Supreme Lord married Rukmini, the beautiful-faced daughter of Bhishmaka, in the Rakshasa style, or so I have heard. My Lord, I wish to hear how the immeasurably powerful Lord Krishna took away his bride while defeating such kings as Magadha and Shalva. What experienced listener, O Brahmana, could ever grow satiated while listening to the pious, charming, and ever-fresh topics of Lord Krishna, which cleanse away the world's contamination? Sri Badarayani said, there was a king named Bhishmaka, the powerful ruler of Vidarbha. He had 5 sons and 1 daughter of lovely countenance. Rukmi was the firstborn son, followed by Rukmarta, Rukmabahu, Rukmakesh, and Rukmamali. Their sister was the exalted Rukmini. Hearing of the beauty, prowess, transcendental character, and opulences of Mukunda from visitors to the palace who sang his praises, Rukmini decided that he would be the perfect husband for her. Lord Krishna knew that Rukmini possessed intelligence, auspicious bodily markings, magnanimity, beauty, proper behavior, and all other good qualities. Concluding that she would be an ideal wife for him, he made up his mind to marry her. O king, because Rukmi envied the Lord, he forbade his family members to give his sister to Krishna, although they wanted to. Instead, Rukmi decided to give Rukmini to Shishupal. Dark-eyed Vaidarbhi was aware of this plan, and it deeply upset her. Analyzing the situation, she quickly sent a trustworthy Brahmana to Krishna. Upon reaching Dwarka, the Brahmana was brought inside by the gatekeepers and saw the primeval personality of Godhead sitting on a golden throne. Seeing the Brahmana, Sri Krishna, Lord of the Brahmanas, came down from his throne and seated him. Then the Lord worshipped him, just as he himself is worshipped by the demigods. After the Brahmana had eaten and rested, Sri Krishna, the goal of saintly devotees, came forward, and while massaging the Brahmana's feet with his own hands, he patiently questioned him as follows. The Supreme Lord said, "O best of exalted Brahmanas, are your religious practices sanctioned by senior authorities, proceeding without great difficulty? Is your mind always fully satisfied?" When a Brahmana is satisfied with whatever comes his way and does not fall away from his religious duties, those very religious principles become his desire cow, fulfilling all his wishes. An unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one planet to another, even if he becomes king of heaven. But a satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. I repeatedly bow my head in respect to those Brahmanas who are satisfied with their lot. Saintly, prideless, and peaceful, they are the best well-wishers of all human beings, of all living beings. O Brahmana, is your king attending to your welfare? Indeed, that king in whose country the citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. Whence have you come, crossing the impassable sea, and for what purpose? Explain all this to us, if it is not a secret, and tell us what we may do for you. Thus questioned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who incarnates to perform his pastimes, the Brahmana told him everything. She, Rukmini, said in her letter, as read by the Brahmana, "O beauty of the worlds, having heard of your qualities, which enter the ears of those who hear and remove their bodily distress, and having also heard of your beauty, which fulfills all the visual desires of those who see, I have fixed my shameless mind upon you, O Krishna." O Mukunda, you are equal only to yourself in lineage, character, beauty, knowledge, youthfulness, wealth, and influence. O lion among men, you delight the minds of all mankind. What aristocratic, sober-minded, and marriageable girl of a good family would not choose you as her husband when the proper time has come? Therefore, my dear Lord, I have chosen you as my husband, and I surrender myself to you. Please come swiftly, O Almighty One, and make me your wife. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, let Shishupal never touch the hero's portion like a jackal stealing the property of a lion. If I have sufficiently worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead by pious works, sacrifices, charity, rituals, and vows, and also by worshipping the demigods, brahmanas, and gurus, then may Gadagraja come and take my hand, and not Dhammaghosha's son or anyone else. O unconquerable one, tomorrow when my marriage ceremony is about to begin, you should arrive unseen in Vidarbha and surround yourself with the leaders of your army. Then crush the forces of Chaitya and Maghavendra and marry me in the Rakshasa style, winning me with your valor. Since I will be staying within the inner chambers of the palace, you may wonder, how can I carry you away without killing some of your relatives? But I shall tell you a way. On the day before the marriage, there is a grand procession to honor the royal family's deity. And in this procession, the new bride goes outside the city to visit goddess Girija. O lotus-eyed one, great souls like Lord Shiva hanker to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet and thereby destroy their ignorance. If I cannot obtain your mercy, I shall simply give up my vital force, which will have become weak from the severe penances I will perform. Then after hundreds of lifetimes of endeavor, I may obtain your mercy. The Brahmana said, "This is the confidential message I have brought with me. O Lord of the Yadus, please consider what must be done in these circumstances and do it at once. Any of the verses that you heard that connected them, that you became fascinated, they fastened themselves to your mind? Yes. There's one fortunate soul here who a verse from the Bhagavatam has fastened itself to his mind. Now let's hear about that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I don't remember the exact verse. It was a little bit previous, but it really stuck to me. I'm sorry, I can't.
We'll find it.
Yeah.
Just kind of give us an indication.
I think it was.
Mukarvin's right here, and we have her ready to find it. Go ahead. Give us the gist.
It was something very inspiring. It was I think it was in the middle portion of Rukmini's dialogue. I
Go
forgot
to the middle.
exactly what it was. I apologize.
Well, you got to at least try. I'm saying, can you move to the middle? You hear what he's saying?
Sure,
Try to
yeah.
move him. He's in anxiety. He can't find his verse. This is another kind of devotional process. You hear a verse, you remember part of it, but you can't remember where it is. And then you go crazy trying to find it. You can spend hours. You'll call people on the phone, say, no, it's not there. It's in the other place. And when you find it, then your life comes back. So this is a kind of separation from Krishna. So you should become attached to the Shastra like that these verses become your life and soul, and you have to find them. So we have to help him. Otherwise, the rest of the day, he's going to be in this kind of anxiety.
Yeah, I can't. Every verse I'm reading is actually, if I read it again, it's so transcendental that every verse has a special quality to it. So I'll just repeat one that really resonates with me right now. And it says that the Brahmanas are the best. 10.52.33.
3.3. Okay.
It says that essentially that the Brahmanas are the best well-wishers of all living beings, which is nice to hear.
I repeatedly bow my head in respect to those Brahmanas who are satisfied with their lot. Saintly, prideless, and peaceful, they are the best well-wishers of living beings. And the one before it says that, an unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one planet to another, even if he becomes king of heaven. But a satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. Those very important verses. Yeah? Let's look at the purports, if they have purports. You just click on the verse instead of going all the way back. The verse itself where you were. Anyway, there's many methods. Go to the one before, please. Those who are unsatisfied feel distress throughout their body, becoming subject to many diseases. A satisfied Brahmana, however, though he may possess nothing, is peaceful and calm, and there is no distress within his body or mind. Next. Just hit next. It's right there. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that swalabha also means achieving one's self, or in other words, self-realization. Thus, an advanced Brahmana is always satisfied with his spiritual understanding, never depending on material formalities or facilities. That's beautiful, isn't it? He's always satisfied with his spiritual understanding. This is something Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Give me a Gita, please. You don't hear that on the street every day. Give me a Gita. It's like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. Krishna says the transcendental knowledge is so sublime and satisfying. This is Bhagavad Gita. Did you? Fourth chapter. And it's 38th verse. I think I'm going to move over there. It's very difficult. We should just have a sliding thing that moves.
Would be a good idea, Guru Maharaj, to sit in the right direction the next time.
A little more.
And face towards a room like that.
Maybe. At a certain time of year, the direction of the sun is like that, so we'll have to mark it on the calendar when we set up over there. Okay, now you're going to really enjoy this verse. This verse, we'll look at the Sanskrit and the English. I'll say, please repeat. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalinatmani vindati. In this world, there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Do you find that to be complementary to the verse we just read about the Brahmana being satisfied with knowledge? Please say yes. Yes. Purport. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. This knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service, and when one is situated in transcendental knowledge, he need not search for peace elsewhere, for he enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in Bhagavad Gita. And the next verse is, continues in the same vein. Shadava labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriyaha jnanam labva param shantim acharanadi gacchati. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Purport. Such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness he can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls his senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all the devotees present here, and everybody who has joined us online this morning. These two verses are very encouraging, aren't they? Because there's a way in which we have a sense, people in general have a sense that the search for happiness will not end well, and that it's not going well either. And when one comes closer to spiritual life, there's an intuition that happiness is already within me, and I just have to find it. That revelation is quite encouraging because it seems more reasonable and it's altogether possible to attain it. And in this verse, Krishna's talking about how if one continues the process of devotional service and controls the senses, then he can attain the highest perfection. And this is what he calls faith, or this abiding sense that by performing devotional service, especially by chanting Hare Krishna, then everything else is included. In fact, there's a feeling of separation from Krishna through the false ego, in the sense that I conceive myself as an all-important living entity. That is, Deha Patra Kalatradeshu Atmasainisa Satsapi. Shukadeva Goswami describes how through the extension of myself, through the misconception of material life, I consider that my body, the bodies of my family members, my nation by extension, and all of my temporary possessions, these become all important. This is the small world created by my false ego. And living within this small world is I experience anxiety at every moment. Bhayam dvitiya binibeshata syad. Because I've created this reflected world, which is an extension of my false ego, I then experience fear. Dvitiya means a second life, outside the life of Krishna. Whereas getting the clear knowledge of Krishna consciousness, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 434, actually it's 435. First of all, Krishna says you need to have perfect knowledge, and to get that you have to go to a person. As people carry knowledge around. And a person who has attained knowledge then can give it to you if you approach in the right mood. This is the way to come to this perfect knowledge. Then he describes what perfect knowledge is in 35. Gyajgatva na punar moham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani drakshantyatma atomayi. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, they are mine. So there's a sense of oneness when one has transcendental knowledge. Of course, those who propound undifferent monism, that we're all the same as God, or we merge into God, have an erroneous philosophy which is also not satisfying and is actually detrimental to the happiness of the soul. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, klesho dikartaras tesham. It's a very troublesome kind of philosophy when it is not clearly defined that we are servants of Krishna. Although we're one, we're separate at the same time. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's perfect synthesis of the Vedic philosophy, which is Achintya Beda Abed Tattva, which is I'm simultaneously one with and different from Krishna. However, in my materialistic mindset, I consider myself to be separated from Krishna. And again, bhayam dvitiya, because of that, syat, fear arises in my life. So the solution, or spiritual life, means to merge back into Krishna. And one can easily do that by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And this merging means to merge in purpose and in service. There's a blank spot right over there, if you could fill it in. I hate those oases in there. Blank spot. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So, when we have this sense of spiritually merging into the existence of Krishna, by merging our purpose with Krishna's purpose, I no longer have a separate purpose from Krishna, but my purpose is one with Krishna's, and I merge into him in the mood of service, then I can feel this satisfaction. And transcendental knowledge means to understand that I'm in Krishna and I'm his. This is what Krishna is telling us is the result of getting perfect knowledge. And Krishna is all-pervading. he describes this at the end of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that by a single fragment of myself, he says, I pervade all these worlds. He expands himself from the spiritual world into, of course, first Balaram, and then the Chaturvyuha, and then Mahasankarshan, and then there are the Purushas that expand the material world. And one of the Purushas extends himself into every atom and into the heart of every living entity. So Krishna's everywhere. And his energies are also Krishna. Although he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Binna Prakritir Ashtada, when he describes his various energies, he says, Bhumir Apo Analo Vayu Kamano Bhujar Evacha Ahankara Ityame Binna Prakritir Ashtada. He names the various separated material energies. So in one sense, they're separated, but in another sense, they're also Krishna because they emanate from him. And Aham Sarvasya Prabhu, everything emanates from Krishna, and in one sense, everything is Krishna. So in spiritual knowledge, in spiritual consciousness, one merges back into Krishna and becomes aware that I'm dependent on Krishna. Krishna is within me. I'm within Krishna. And if one hones one's desire to serve Krishna, then one becomes perfectly harmonious with one's own purpose in life, which is to serve Krishna and with the universe. And then one can feel this satisfaction. So as Rukmini was describing the Brahmanas, or at least in the chapter we were reading, it's described how Brahmanas become peaceful because they're in Brahman. And this Brahman means to be focused on the Supreme Brahman. And to that end, now we're going to, first we'll sing some songs. And then after that, I'm going to go into the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing from where we left off last time, which was, we started on the 1st chapter of the 7th canto, and this morning, whatever it is, we'll talk about the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam. Can you slide that over a little bit? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Ballabha Girivaradari Gopi Janna Ballabha Girivaradari Jashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Kirivaradhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye. So we're continuing with the Srimad Bhagavatam recital, which is the very means of conquest. The material existence is difficult, we should say impossible to overcome for the living entity until he has outside help. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva has given this transcendental literature, which is an incarnation of Krishna. Anarto pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga madhok saje lokasya janato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. Knowing that people in general were helpless without this knowledge, Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very charming also how he did so with the guidance of his spiritual master Narada Muni. You can read about this in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam. And if you want something extra to do in your life, you can memorize that chapter. Just take time to memorize it. All you have to do is just recite it every day and think about it and pray, and then Krishna will reveal all the verses to you. And in that chapter we find that Narada Muni had come to the aid of Srila Vyasadeva and told him why Srila Vyasadeva, his disciple, was feeling despondent. And this is a great lesson for all of us. And the reason was, he said, that you haven't very specifically elaborated upon the personal pastimes of Krishna, the personality of Godhead. And people need to hear that, and they need to understand the process of pure devotional service. So after going into samadhi and seeing for himself the pastimes of the Lord and how his energies are working, Srila Vyasadeva came out, and he then compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is known as Samadhi Bhashya. It's what you say after you come out of perfect samadhi. And that's what you want to hear. So that by hearing that regularly every day, one can rise above the influence of the three modes of material nature. The influence actually resides within the heart of every living entity because of contact with material nature. The living entity becomes influenced and therefore identifies him or herself with the material body and the material world. But Nasha Praeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. By serving the Bhagavatam, and how do you do that? By listening, taking the time out. It's the way to love Krishna, is take time out from my own agenda and my own attendance to my material necessities and needs and wants. And I just give oral reception. Submissive oral reception also means that I'm submissive to the message, that I believe in it. I understand through well-reasoned faith that it is Krishna himself. And that by simply hearing, even though I don't know anything right now, if I listen in the assembly of devotees, that I'll come to know who Krishna is and my heart will become purified. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. The contaminations within the heart are reduced by this process. So starting off in chapter 2, the 7th canto, which is entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. And this will be very important teachings are coming in the Bhagavatam through the story of the appearance of Hiranyakashipu. And not the least of which is explained by Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. After this, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know the end of the story, just close your ears right now. Lord Nrsingadev comes and kills Hiranyakashipu. He tears him to shreds, actually. And Hiranyakashipu represents the highest attainment of material success. You can't get any better than that. He subjugated everyone except for Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And he also had everything. He had everything. He was controlling everything. He was on the top of the world through his austerities. And Prahlad Maharaj then points out in his prayers that within a moment he was vanquished. He said, therefore, why would I want anything? He saw for himself how powerful his father became and how in one moment Lord Nrsingadev came and wiped everything out. So he said, so why should I want anything in the material world? I don't need it. I don't need to be involved with that at all. And we can assume that any kind of attainment in the material world Hiranyakashipu had already. So he's the iconic figure in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hiranyakashipu means that he had all the material comforts everybody's looking for. And if one analyzes the way of material life, one will come to see that it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Everything should be dedicated to the Supreme Personality of God. Then one can work hard and utilize one's God-given talents to apply oneself for attaining something, as long as it's for Krishna. But if you do it for yourself, you'll end up in getting exactly what you didn't want instead. For instance, recently there was a comprehensive study. I forget which university did this, but it just came out, and it's all about the people who drive Ubers. And I think they studied Uber. I don't know if they studied Lyft. MIT. Well, that adds a little more weight to it too, doesn't it? Study at MIT about Uber drivers. It ends up after you take away the depreciation from your car, the cost of the gas, the opportunity time that you took and everything like that, driving, you earn $3.33 an hour, which isn't enough to survive, especially in Silicon Valley. And the study also pointed out that most drivers don't know that because they're independent contractors, so that they're supposed to figure that all out for themselves and calculate. So we're supposed to calculate also, like, what do you get out of working very hard in the material world? Take away the depreciation and all the ways in which you end up spending your energy in this world. And if you look at the end result, you find out that you end up in negative numbers. You can't win in the material world. That's one of the great lessons of Hiranyakashipu. And if someone loses their optimism for the material world, of course, they can simply become morose. But the philosophy of actual spiritual life means that I have a higher purpose, I have senses for a reason, and I can use them industriously in order to please the Lord. And then, no matter what I do, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Neha bikramanashosti pratyavayo navidite solpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. That even if you try a little bit on that side, then you'll be successful, and it'll all be counted. And even if you don't, externally it appears you didn't succeed, because you tried for the Lord, you succeed. And of course the famous story of Jatayu is there to prove that. So, in this second chapter, Hiranyakashipu is aggrieved. So why is he grieved? Because Hiranyaka was killed. It was his brother. And people become attached to their family members. And when somebody dies, then they become very morose. It's natural. Hiranyakashipu was especially morose, but he was always also angry. So we'll find in this chapter that he takes out his anger by getting together a bunch of his gundas. That's what they are. They're really demoniac people. They're demons and rakshasas. And people have Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad Gita. People have various natures. And some people are divine and others are asuric, demoniac. They have asuric nature. And when people have asuric nature, it comes out very clearly in this chapter that they want to destroy Brahminical culture. And they want to wreck the whole world so nobody can use it. Nobody else gets to use it. They just try to exploit it all, and anything else they try to ruin. And they're really against God. They're against the idea of God. There is systematic propaganda, Prabhupada writes in his commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam, to stop the Krishna consciousness movement or the propagation of knowledge about God. And we'll find that there are people who are averse. And there are, besides the ways in which in this chapter we find that Hiranyakashipu and his followers went around and killed people, they cut down trees, they killed cows, they broke up the Vedic yagyas that were going on, defiled them, did everything they could to disrupt the culture, especially performing sacrifice. So in a similar way, there's systematic ways through which knowledge gets filtered through our society. Karma Prabhu in his talk at Stanford when he came here a while back talked about this, and he talks about it in his book, Forbidden Archaeology, how there's a knowledge filter that comes through small groups of so-called scientists who then only allow certain kinds of knowledge to come into the general textbooks that are used in high schools and in schools below high school, so that this kind of demoniac influence is inculcated, knowledge is inculcated into the general masses of people. Therefore, Prabhupada had a very specific point to his mission of defeating this kind of knowledge that propounds that matter comes from life, and that purpose of life is altogether materialistic. There's nothing beyond this world. There is no God in control. And Krishna describes this mentality in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So Hiranyakashipu is an iconic figure that represents all of this. And he got together all of his people, and he said, wreck everything. So this is the first part of the chapter. And Prabhupada writes that he agitated the minds of the demons and Rakshasas to disturb the rituals of the sages and others on earth. So when those kinds of rituals are destroyed, then there's great anxiety within the world, because this is the source of happiness. It's counterintuitive. People don't know at first the science that if you please God through the proper Vedic rituals, then you'll also become pleased. This requires sattva-gun. You have to have a little bit of tinge of goodness to understand how this works. Otherwise, people in rajas think you become happy by working harder and harder. And people in the mode of ignorance think you become happy by sleeping and taking more and more intoxication. But through sattva-gun, one realizes the divine system, which Krishna gives in a verse that we can overlook because we've heard it so many times. But it's a verse you can live in. And if you keep these three categories in your mind, then your life will always be perfectly aligned. And he says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. So these three things are practically, when practically applied in our life, will bring us to perfect harmony. So the first is that whatever we do is meant to be given as a service to Krishna, because he's the enjoyer of all sacrifice. As it's put there, it sounds like abstract language, or it may be abstract to us, so it may sound archaic or non-applicable in our life. He's the enjoyer of all sacrifices. What do you mean by that? Bhoktaram yagatapasam. It means that everything's meant to be done for Krishna. He's the beneficiary of all our activities. And when we do that, it's just as if we're feeding, using all our senses in order to feed the stomach. And then the stomach knows what to do with it. It perfectly distributes all of the food that we give to all the limbs of the body, and the whole body lives harmoniously. And so, remembering this, that as Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers, Naivatmana prabhur ayam nijalabha purno manam janada vidusha karuno vranite. That Krishna doesn't need our offerings, but when we give to Krishna, then we become happy and satisfied. And he goes on to say that this is just like when you decorate your face, then the reflection of your face in the mirror is also decorated. Have you ever noticed that? So in a similar way, this verse points out that we're expansions of Krishna. We're one with Krishna but separate, and our purpose is to serve Krishna, and when we do, we become satisfied and happy. Just like when we serve the stomach, then we also become happy. So we become connected to Krishna through this. So remembering that when my energy goes towards satisfying Krishna, then I become satisfied. This is one of the great secrets of life. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram solves a lot of problems, because there's always anxiety in one's mind about what's my stuff and what's other people's stuff. And the whole court system is set up basically to allocate who gets to have what. And people endlessly fight over boundaries. If you look at the so-called United States of America, and you can see its history, there were indigenous tribes living here at a certain point. They fought over who got to have which area. I mean, I don't know who'd fight over Nebraska, but some people did. And then there's, other people landed on the shore and said, hey, we'd like to have this too. And they started, conflicts with the people who already lived here. And then the people who came to take over, they had conflicts with themselves. At some point, the French owned a lot of the territory in the Middle West. This California, where we live now, was part of Mexico. There were wars, there were revolutions. If you trace them back, you'll see that everyone's fighting over this. And as Bhumi, Earth Personified, notes in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, that from her perspective, it's crazy. He said, people are coming and going. He said, you're on your way out. You just stepped in. You're only here for a few minutes, and you're using all your time to fight over all these things. But if you understand Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, everything belongs to Krishna. He's controlling it. He owns it. So just consider everything that you have and everything that's in the world. If you consider it belongs to Krishna, he's the controller of it. Then you'll have peace. And finally, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, Krishna is the best friend. If you remember that no one else but Krishna can be the best friend, unless somebody's a representative of Krishna, they're simply speaking on his behalf, then they can also be a best friend. But all the other people in the world who are offering you their help are not helping you when it's independent from the knowledge of Krishna, because they're simply speculating. They may be good-hearted, but because they don't know how to help you, it's almost worse. As is mentioned in the Sri Upanishad, that ignorance is bad, but worse than ignorance, if you can imagine such a thing, is so-called knowledge. And that means that somebody who says, yes, I have a PhD in such and such, let me help you, but they don't have knowledge of Suridam Sarvabhutanam and how Krishna is controlling everything, how all sacrifices meant for him. When they help you, it's actually a disservice. And although it seems like very sophisticated knowledge because this person has a degree and all these kinds of ideas, Prabhupada mentions it's like the jewel on the head of a serpent. It looks very beautiful, and therefore it's like, oh, I want that. And then you get bit by the serpent. So, in verse 7 to 11, we'll just look at this beautiful purport. Prabhupada writes something that is practical for us, because I've mentioned about Vedic sacrifice and how Hiranyakashipu wanted to stop that. And in this verse, we hear, the basic principle of Brahminical culture is to satisfy Lord Vishnu, the personification of sacrificial and ritualistic ceremonies. Lord Vishnu is the personified reservoir of all religious principles, and he is the shelter of all the demigods, the great pitas, and the people in general. When the brahmanas are killed, no one will exist to encourage the kshatriyas to perform yagyas, and thus the demigods, not being appeased by yagya, will automatically die. Purport. Since Vishnu is the central point of Brahminical culture, Hiranyakashipu's plan was to kill Vishnu. For if Vishnu were killed, naturally the Brahminical culture would also be lost. With Brahminical culture lost, yagya would no longer be performed, and for want of yagya, the regular distribution of rainfall would cease. Yagnad bhavati parjanya. Thus, there would be disturbances all over the world, and naturally the demigods would be defeated. From this verse, we get a clear indication of how human society is disturbed when the Vedic Aryan civilization is killed and the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies performed by the Brahmanas are stopped. Kalo Shudra Sambhava, because the population of the modern world consists mostly of Shudras, the Brahminical culture is now lost and is extremely difficult to reestablish in a proper way. I might add too, the Shudras aren't very good, at least in America. People don't know how to make stuff or do services very nicely. And they charge more than the people who cut hair or sweep floors, they charge like $150 an hour or something like that. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has recommended the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, which will revive Brahminical culture very easily. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalo nasteva 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 gatiranyata. Because of the increment in demoniac population, people have lost Brahminical culture. Nor is there a Kshatriya government. Instead, the government is a democracy in which any Shudra can be voted into taking up the governmental reins and capture the power to rule. No commentary necessary. Because of the poisonous effects of Kali Yuga, the Shastra, Bhagavatam 12:2-13 says, Dasyu prayeshu rajasu, the government will adopt the policies of dasyus or plunderers. Thus there will be no instructions from the brahmanas. And even if there are Brahminical instructions, there will be no Kshatriya rulers who can follow them. Aside from Satya Yuga, even formerly, in the days when demons were flourishing, Hiranyakashipu planned to destroy the Brahminical culture and the Kshatriya government and thus create chaos all over the world. Although in Satya Yuga this plan was very difficult to execute, in Kali Yuga, which is full of Shudras and demons, the Brahminical culture is lost and can be revived only by the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement, or the Hare Krishna movement, has been inaugurated to revive Brahminical culture very easily so that people may become happy and peaceful in this life and prepare for elevation in the next. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya quotes this verse from the Brahmanda Purana. Vipra jagnadi mulam tu harir ityasuram matam harir eva hi sarvasya mulam samyam mato nripa. O king, the demons think that Hari, Lord Vishnu, exists because of the Brahmins and Yajna, but factually Hari is the cause of everything, including the Brahmins and Yajna. Therefore, through the popularizing of Hari Kirtan, or the Sankirtan movement, the Brahminical culture and Kshatriya government will automatically come back and people will be extremely happy. So this is a worthwhile cause to popularize the chanting of Hare Krishna. And Brahminical culture increases on that basis. Well, I have a note here, so I'm going to follow it. I don't know what it means exactly, but it says C. Gajendra 8:3-16. So maybe there's something in this. And in just a minute, we're going to take reflections. Okay, so 8:3-16. So from this point about how when you invoke the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you popularize it, then naturally Vedic culture arises from the chanting of Hare Krishna. Everything comes from that. So here's a verse in which Gajendra, who's offering prayers to the Lord, says, My Lord, as the fire in Arni wood is covered, you and your unlimited knowledge are covered by the material modes of nature. Your mind, however, is not attentive to the activities of the modes of nature. Those who are advanced in spiritual knowledge are not subject to the regulative principles directed in the Vedic literatures. Because such advanced souls are transcendental, you personally appear in their pure minds. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, in the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Tesham evanukampartam aham jnanajam tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnana dipena basvata. For a devotee who has taken the lotus feet of the Lord within his heart, the Lord gives spiritual enlightenment known as Jnana Dipa, by special mercy from him, from within. This Jnana Dipa is compared to the fire hidden within Arani wood. To perform fire sacrifices, great sages previously did not ignite a fire directly. The fire would be invoked from Arani wood. Similarly, all living entities are covered by the modes of material nature, and the fire of knowledge can be ignited only by the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one takes him within one's heart. Savai Manat Krishna Padara Vindayo. If one takes seriously the lotus feet of Krishna, who is seated within one's heart, the Lord eradicates all ignorance. By the torch of knowledge, one immediately understands everything properly by the special mercy of the Supreme Lord and becomes self-realized. In other words, although a devotee may externally not be very well educated, because of his devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives him enlightenment from within. If the Lord gives enlightenment from within, how can one be in ignorance? Therefore, the allegation of the Mayavadis that the devotional path is for the unintelligent or uneducated is untrue. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvargunas tatra samasate sura. If one becomes an unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Lord, he automatically manifests all good qualities. Such a devotee is above the instructions of the Vedas. He is a Paramahamsa. Even without going through the Vedic literature, a devotee becomes pure and enlightened by the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, my Lord, the devotee says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. This also supporting that just by taking to the direct process of devotional service, then naturally all good qualities come out. And this fire of knowledge, Prabhupada writes, is ignited by the Lord within the heart. So from any position, one can make one's life auspicious and can, as Prabhupada's worldview and his mission was to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world so that this fire could pervade the whole world and affect people in the way that it's supposed to, in a very positive way so they can become advanced. And now we'll take a couple of reflections. Anything that you've heard so far? Yes.
I like the initial point that you mentioned about the object of sadhana is meant to fascinate our mind.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, when we are reading the Rukmini section, I was thinking about how Rukmini also just heard about Krishna and then how she got fascinated just by hearing about Krishna, she got attracted.
Yeah, I noticed that also in that section. It's mentioned that she heard about Krishna kind of incidentally from others. And she developed that attraction and determination. So that's the process, if you hear regularly. Yes, what other things did you hear so far? Yes.
I like the point where you told about Bhuktaram Yagyatapasam, that everything is meant to be done for satisfying Krishna. It seems a very simple example that you said, when we look at the mirror, when we dress ourselves, we notice that the reflection also gets decorated. So we fail to often remember that we are part and parcels of Krishna. So when we satisfy Krishna, we automatically get satisfied. We don't have to endeavor for it separately. This struck me.
Yeah, it's a very practical thing because it's eternally true. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that everyone's a part and parcel. The living entities are part and parcels of me. But they're struggling very hard with the six senses and the mind. And the way to overcome that is by reconnecting oneself to one's constitutional position. We read 2 days ago that we're operating on two platforms while we're here in the material world, because we're a mixture of matter and spirit. Actually, we're spirit, but we've assumed a temporary material body and mind. So Prabhupada says we have a constitutional nature and we also have a conditioned nature. And both have to be accommodated. But one has to distinguish between the two and understand that by investment in my constitutional nature, even as I'm maintaining my conditioned existence, only by that will I become successful and happy. And one has to distinguish between the two. Yes?
I like the analogy that you gave about the Uber study.
Yeah, it's kind of, there was this big to-do about how, people, this is going to help the whole world and the economy and how many people it was helping. But as it turns out now, there's a really rapid turnover, because once drivers realize that I'm driving and driving and driving and driving, but I'm earning $3.33 an hour for all my troubles, even though it appears that they're getting cash in hand. I mean, the MIT study really is kind of a disillusionment for those who are driving, and they're thinking, oh, I'm doing pretty well on Uber. but actually there's so much involved. In fact, there are ways in which you can look at, and how this has been analyzed. People go to work. In order to go to work, you have to have a car, and then you also have to have a wardrobe. That costs a lot of money to maintain the wardrobe. And then if you go into details, you can make a long list of the things that you have to keep in order to maintain just going to your job. And if you subtract all that, see, this is something people don't think about. If you subtract all that from actually what you take away at the end of the day, then you end up with $3.33, no matter where you work. And even that, then the government will take, the rest of that away, and you'll end up, hey, I don't have anything. See, that's the point. You don't have anything anyway. It all belongs to Krishna. And if you just realize that your constitutional position is that I'm a servitor of Krishna, there's no anxiety, because my dealing with the material world, it doesn't work out, because I can't handle it. It's not an energy that I can accommodate very well, or at all, ultimately. Govindacharan Prabhu? Oh, yes, Yashoda Kripa.
Haribol. The shlok that we talked on, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suhridham Sarva Bhutanam Gyatvam Shante Michyati. So this shlok actually portrays a very beautiful picture of God Krishna as a kind-hearted friend to everyone. Versus some popular beliefs in other religions that where over the centuries and over the time periods we have learned that things have been modified or whatever happened, but those religions are portraying a very hellish or a punishing image of God. Like, if you don't do this, don't follow, He will punish you and you will rot in hell forever and ever, all those things. Versus the real picture of God, who is really helpful and kind-hearted to you. And all the three properties that you give the formula of three things to remember. Then the kind-heartedness of the God, Suhridam, is basically something that portrays that He is very soft and friend to everyone.
Yeah, it's a very important point. And you mentioned that if you don't do the right thing, then you'll be punished. But it's even worse than that. There's a pervading idea that God is arbitrary, because people are born with various advantages, relative advantages over others. What happens if you're born poor and ugly? What happened to you? It's like, okay, it's just God's test. Well, why does one person get tested like this and another person get tested like that? This is what Chaitanya Charan Prabhu describes as divine caprice. Capriciousness means whimsy. God's just playing around with everybody, and there's no fair system. There's no mercy in it. This, of course, is not a complete philosophy and not understanding, because once you go into understanding how the universe is set up in such a way that everybody gets exactly what they deserve, and that it's not a punishment, but it's actually a means of refining oneself so that one can come to perfect knowledge and harmony, and one sees that Krishna is the friend, and also the way He's set up everything is benevolent, then life takes on a new meaning. And if one has a philosophy that's incomplete, then one will also act in an incomplete way, and one will not feel happy or satisfied, ultimately. Yes, 2 or 3 more. Jai Kanai.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for the very enlightening class. I kept hearing this phrase like submissive oral reception time and again. And I was not able to connect the word submissive before today. But yeah, you explained this means with faith and conviction, and then it connects. Really.
Yes, and in various sections of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada points out that by this one quality alone, one can come to the perfection of devotional service. That one quality is submission. If you submit to Krishna, especially through the process of submissive oral reception, then this is the way in which one rapidly makes progress. So submitting oneself. There are ways in which one may listen in an argumentative way, or be inattentive, which is a way of voting with one's feet that I really don't consider this to be very important. In fact, It's one of the ways in which, by just giving attention to the holy name, you're proving your devotion to the holy name, that I believe in this. Otherwise, the mind says, there's nothing in this for me, so I'm going to go somewhere else while you're chanting. And however, giving one's full attention to Krishna is a kind of love. It's showing that I believe in you and I actually love you. So I'm giving you my attention. Yes?
I have a question, follow-up question.
A follow-up question, okay.
So we heard in previous 2 lectures that everybody gets what they deserve, but at times we are talking to people who are in those hard places or hard circumstances, and it becomes very difficult for the person who is talking or trying to explain to them that you are getting exactly what you deserve. So I wanted to request if you can tell us how to talk through those situations with those people.
In order to that's a very blunt and startling statement, that everyone gets exactly what they deserve, especially because everyone's suffering in the material world. And even for devotees, it's very difficult. Devotees dedicate themselves to Krishna and then something will happen. It's inexplicable. And it's very difficult for that to keep away that little voice that says, why me? And why now? Or when something happens to one of our beloved devotees, and they're like, Krishna, what were you thinking? I remember, when Indra Prabhu suddenly left, and then there was one of my god sisters in Vrindavan wrote a poem. It was like, Krishna, what were you thinking? So it's not so easy. So there's a context that's necessary in order to present that. And just over the last week, we went to Salesforce and Google and we were talking about karma. Fortunately, I had my Changing Bodies exhibit and I brought it with me. And when I was showing it, then I was also feeling like I need 3 of these, or 300 of them, put side by side to present the context of this. As when people hear through categories of knowledge that we're on a continuum, and this is a very key point, we're on a continuum, and that whatever happens in a previous life can also then we'll get the reaction in a life in the future. That's an important context to understand. Otherwise, people become incensed. And even if you give the context, even at Salesforce, when I gave the context and explained it, there was one person that says, this feels like a very disempowering thing, because how can bad things happen to good people? Which is something I had already gone through. And then we went through it again. And then the person became accepting of the idea and appreciating. But you definitely have to have the context to understand that statement and not just make it. In fact, there's a famous case, and this might have also been an article in the BTG, or at least it was an article somewhere that floated around ISKCON, of a famous soccer coach in the UK who believed in reincarnation. And he had mentioned in some interview, he was very famous and popular, and he had mentioned in an interview about how when people were born with disabilities, it was karma they were getting from previous life. And he was summarily fired and became persona non grata because there was such a public outcry. Because it lacked the context. They couldn't understand the whole thing, and therefore people are repulsed by this idea that because they perceive it as arbitrary, and they get what you deserve, but I can't see it. It's just, why does a baby deserve something like that? Or why I didn't hurt anybody. Why did this happen? It's due to incomplete knowledge and lack of context. There's a couple more, and then we'll come back to Manjula Kanta. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
The same, the Bhaktanam Yagya Tapasang Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. In that context, Krishna says, I am the master of all billion of universe and I am the supreme enjoyer. But still, he is our greatest friend. Generally, we have seen that whoever is in that kind of little topmost position, they get puffed up. But Krishna says, I am your dearest friend. So that gives us much more pleasure that we are serving to a Lord. Even if he is the master of billion of universe, he is so dear to us. He is so loving, and I mean, it gives a great pleasure to serve such kind of magnanimous personality. And in that context, when I was in the Rukmini Devi, she's saying that you are my husband, and I surrender to you. We have seen so many Bhagavatam story, Gajendra, Prahlad Maharaj. Whenever somebody surrenders, Lord goes out of the way to actually help them. And in that Chaitanya Chaitamrita, I was just reading, I will take 1 minute, even a Lord is not fulfilling the desire of Radharani and Gopis to go back from Dwaraka to Vrindavan when Radharani and Gopis are lamenting. He becomes depted, and he came to the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to feel the separation. So such kind of magnanimous personality if Lord is, and that gives us so much satisfaction and encourage to really be in the service of Lord. Thank you.
You make good points, and with such utsahan too. It's very nice. Thank you. Was there one or two more? Okay, 2 more. Manjula Kanta, then Shraddha.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, you were saying when people hear through categories of knowledge that we are on a continuum, they struggle to understand it because their understanding of life is arbitrary. You lost me.
Arbitrary means that there's some kind of either the universe is arbitrary or God's arbitrary or capricious in the way it's being meted out. So, they become angry.
Arbitrary, it says, is based on random chance.
Yes.
So we assume that what we get is just because the dice rolled wrong for me.
Well, either that or there's an idea of a malicious God or a capricious God. See, either there's no controller and it's all happening by chance, and that's very disempowering, because then what can I do? I either win the lottery or I don't. And the other one is that there is a God, but he's just messing with us. It's like, let's put this guy in a disadvantage, and then this one start over here. Nobody likes that kind of thing. If you have a teacher who does that, offers you a quiz, and it's like, okay, Bobby, you could take this, and you take that one. This is twice as hard, No one's going to appreciate that. So to understand the context that there's an equitable way in which Krishna is working everything out, and that can be studied, that can be looked at, and also the understanding that I'm not a dead stone. I'm actually responsible for what I do. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that I don't want anything bad to happen to me and I also want free will, because as Gandhi said to the rulers of India at the time, the British, they said, well, we don't trust you to have independence. He said, we want to be trusted to do the wrong thing, even if you think we'll do the wrong thing. And so that's what freedom means. You have freedom of choice to even do the wrong thing if you want to. That's Krishna's arrangement, that the free will of the living entity, that's our power to do the right or wrong thing. And therefore, we have to take responsibility that whatever situation I'm in now, I've created myself. Coming to that realization means that we then have the power, understanding that I'm an agent of change to improve myself. And the proof that I am an agent is that the Shastra's there. Even though one may say, oh, everything's happening by the power of destiny, and I'm forced by so many influences to act in a certain way. Still, the Shastra is loud and clear, and it says, oh, okay, improve yourself, come out of it. And because it's saying that, it means that we have the power to do it. Otherwise, it has no meaning. There's no logic to the Shastra at all. Shraddha?
So Maharaj, I was thinking about the comment that you had made regarding everything belongs to Krishna. And you had said that everything belongs to Krishna and we actually can't handle it.
Yes. In fact, in the story of Hiranyakashipu, when Brahma's listening to all his demands, Prabhupada mentions that one should not take any benediction that one cannot enjoy peacefully. And so the request on behalf, the living entity who prays to God and says, give me some material benefit, he doesn't understand you can't enjoy it peacefully. You can't take any of it peacefully. Of course, you can take tena tyaktena bunjita. If you take what's allotted to you and you use it properly, then you can be peaceful. But if you ask for more and you think that that's going to make me happy, this is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakaliya Shanta. That Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ataiva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Shri Kami Shakaliya Shanto. That the only person that's actually satisfied is the person who's Nishkam. He doesn't have any desire for himself. He only wants to serve Krishna. It's the Bhakta. Everybody else, Bhukti, I want material benediction. Mukti, I want freedom from it all, which is a reaction to that. And Siddhi, I want some mystic perfection. All these people, Ashanto. Yeah.
So in this context, earlier when you were reading the pastime of Rukmini, and you were asking for verses that stuck you. So
yes.
Rasika Shramani Mataji had actually sent a verse which I didn't get a chance to tell you, but it kind of ties with this, because she said the one that she liked was where Rukmini is saying that Shishupal is like Shishupal's action is like a jackal trying to take away something that belongs to the tiger. So
Yes.
I was just thinking that our lording over the nature is just like that.
That's right.
Trying to
Yes.
jackal behavior.
Very much so. Malini.
The point that you made, that merging into Krishna is actually means to merge with the purpose of Krishna. That was really nice, because the purpose of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he came, he was to propagate the chanting of the holy names. And that ties very nice with the purport which says, when you increase the chanting of the Hare Krishna, then the Brahmanical culture comes back, and then the Kshatriyas and everything falls into place. So it was very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for remembering that. And the merging. Yes, you have another point. Go ahead.
I had a question, Prabhuji.
Oh, yeah.
Prabhuji, many times we hear that we have to worship the lotus feet of Krishna, lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and in the purport also it's mentioned that we have to carry the lotus feet of Krishna in our heart. Can you elaborate more on what does it mean practically to worship the lotus feet of Krishna?
I'll give you Prabhupada's answer, because this is how he answers consistently, and that is remembering the order of the spiritual master. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, yasya prasada nagati kutopi, dhyayams tuvams tasya yasastri sandhyam, ande guru shri charanara. So, on a practical level, for me to think of Krishna's lotus feet seems very distant, but Krishna extends himself to me in this world in a very localized way, in the form of the spiritual master as a representative. Like, it's hard for me to, appreciate Oracle, but if a simple person from Oracle comes over to my house and he's empowered to speak on behalf of Oracle, he can sit in the living room and I can appreciate him, and we can discourse. He'll tell me about, what my part, how I can connect with Oracle, sign the contract and the whole thing, and then it's very practical. So in a similar way, the spiritual master may appear to be an ordinary person, but such a person is delegated, is a representative. And if one follows the order of the spiritual master, then in a very practical way, one keeps Krishna's lotus feet within one's heart and always feels connected to Krishna. This is the answer Prabhupada gives again and again, and how he explained his constant connection through remembering the order of his spiritual master and all of his success as well. Yeah. Yes. Another question.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, my question is from the letter of Rukmini, that she basically asked Krishna to follow the Rakshasa way of kidnapping a woman. On the other side, I've read in several other occasions and purports, Srila Prabhupada mentions this as a Kshatriya ritual to win a woman in win a war or battle and then marry her as a wife. So I'm just unable to reconcile these two things. Rakshasa is more of a mode of ignorance and considered demoniac in nature, versus Kshatriya ritual of winning a wife is more like a mode of passion and kind of more respected and reputation, kind of traditional way of winning a wife. So how do we reconcile this Rakshasa thing?
What is the Kshatriya means of marriage?
As Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purports, that the traditional Kshatriya way is to win a wife in a battle, by fighting or winning, by exercising your right over something, rightful right. So this is something I'm unable to reconcile between Rakshasa way of kidnapping, what Rukmini mentions, versus the Kshatriya traditional way.
Well, it's he really did both in that context because he fought off all the relatives. It's more of semantics, I think, in this case, because he did both. He carried her away, and it's the drama of the story, really. She was like, "Just get me out of here. Just come and grab me and take me away." The fact that she mentions the Rakshasa way, it's Krishna takes any way that becomes glorified. Even in the story, he ran away from Jarasandha, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's cool." It's not like he's a coward. So if he takes a Rakshasa marriage, then it's like, well, that's far out. He just grabbed her. Did you hear about it? He grabbed her off the thing and off the chariot and took her away. But he also fought off everybody because they all got upset, chased after him, and then he just picked them apart, basically. So either way, yes. I have a couple more points to make after this.
I was just thinking, Prabhu, how Rukmini haven't met Krishna, but she has just heard about him. But then she is kind of giving an order, even though it's a request. But Krishna just totally trusts, and then he comes, he takes the action. But I was just thinking the verse that we sang on Gaura Purnimari, the Jeev Jago, like how Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that, I am your only friend, like who other than Gaura is there. So, but he is the one who incarnated to save us. But it is true because we say, Rukmini asked and Krishna does it like a servant. So that was really touching that Krishna trusts and he does it like a true friend and doesn't ask any questions.
Yeah, it is very touching. Yeah. I'm glad we read that story, aren't you? Didn't it change your life, just hearing it? So in this chapter too, also what's notable is that Hiranyakashipu gets together his family, mostly his nephews and his mother, because Hiranyaka had been killed. And he then speaks to them about self-realization in order to appease them. So this is the way in which we deal with all the adversities of life. First and foremost is philosophically. When something happens, we have to rise to the philosophical level. And the best kind of philosophy is understanding Atma Tattva Gyan. So he teaches his family members, and keeping in mind that it's an interesting juxtaposition because of the fact that he's a demon, he wants to destroy Vedic culture, and then a few verses later we find how Hiranyakashipu is speaking this perfect Atma Tattva Gyan to his nephews. Do you know about this? Of course. He, just as a summary, he tells his family members that Hiranyaka, he was killed, but all of us are just passing through. And he gives the example of how people enter within an establishment to have some beverage or something. Like what is that? Daba. Hariom Daba. This is kind of like that, I don't know if Hariom Daba is still in business because they moved the freeway over, but that used to be the road to Vrindavan. On the way back, for some reason, every ISKCON car driver would stop at Hariom Daba and have a paratha or something like that. And people come there to these little roadside places, and they'll sit down, and there's a family here, a family there. They take up conversation, and it's like, "Oh, how are you? Fine, how are you?" And then they get up and go in their cars, and they never see each other again. So in a similar way, Hiranyakashipu told his family members, we're all travelers like that. And we're just moving from one place to the next. This word traveler comes up a lot in the Bhagavatam, and even in the Chaitanya Charamrita. When Mahaprabhu is speaking about the living entity, he calls him a traveler. Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Latipi. She said, we're wandering from one place to another, traveling. The word traveler, comes from the word travail, which means to suffer. the traveling is not, it's actually, read about it years ago, that people who are public speakers, it appears to be a very glamorous thing, traveling here, there, and everywhere. And I read an article by one of them, who was in the National Speakers Association. He was saying, after you see the restrooms in all the different airports around the world, you realize how unglamorous travel really is. And the living entity is inconvenienced in so many ways by having to travel. It's a travail. And there's a sense of being displaced constantly, moving here and there. So this is, as Hiranyakashipu is explaining to his family, it's like, this is our situation. We're just moving about and being forced to move. And then he tells a story of Suyagya, and Suyagya is a great king who dies on the battlefield, and then his queens are attached to him, don't want to put him in the fire, and Yamaraj comes as a small boy and instructs them in knowledge and tells them that you're ignorant, you never even saw your husband, and that actually he never dies, he's simply moved on. And then finally he tells the story of the Kalinga birds, and the hunter comes and he sees the family of Kalinga birds, and he throws the net, and then the little babies are caught, and when the mother and father come back, they're lamenting about, my babies are caught. So then the mother Kalinga bird tries to fly and rescue them, and she gets caught in the net also. And then the male Kalinga bird's crying. He's standing there crying, thinking what to do, and then the hunter shoots him. Little scenario of material life. And so he describes how, everyone's trying to save everyone else. Meanwhile, they're not protected or saved. And this is his summation to his family of why we shouldn't be attached to our families. And of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of people and you shouldn't have human emotions, but it gives a philosophical perspective to see how we're simply moving through this world. And in a couple of points from the purports that you can take away with you. One is from 7.2.38, and at the end of the purport, Prabhupada writes, the Lord says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all other duties and simply surrender unto me. One who does not abide by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given the facility to enjoy this material world. Instead of restricting him, the Lord gives the conditioned soul the opportunity to enjoy, so that by mature experience, after many, many births, bahunam chamanamante, he will understand that surrender to the lotus feet of Vasudeva is the only duty of all living beings. This is an important lesson in our free will, and that Krishna is giving us the opportunity to do the wrong thing, if we so desire, so that we can come to mature experience. And one important point in this statement is that only by maturity can we actually have a strong foothold in the process of devotional service. Maturity means that we've come to a resolute decision within ourselves that devotional service is my only option, or that it's something that I've decided based on seeing everything else and going through everything else that I'm going to surrender to Krishna. And once that determination is there within one's heart, then no external obstacle can stop one from performing devotional service. And until that determination through maturity is there within the heart, then it's very difficult to move forward, because all the obstacles will seem insurmountable. And this we find in the prayers of Rukmini when she says to Krishna that the great souls like Lord Shiva perform all kinds of austerities in order to attain you at the dust of your lotus feet. She said that I'm prepared to give up one body after another in order to attract your mercy. And so this is a sign of maturity, of mature devotional service, mature determination. And And 2 more points, 7249. At the end of the purport, Prabhupada writes, "One must therefore be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances in life he will remain steady in his vows." The verses we should note also, those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore, it is difficult to educate a person in illusion. So, Prabhupada points out again that one must be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances he will remain steady in his vows. So this indicates that in order to remain steady in devotional service, one has to study the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And you have to do it every day, because one of the ways in which one falls behind in any discipline or in any project is letting the trail go cold. For instance, in writing, the bane of writers is leaving gaps and letting the trail go cold. It's amazing how fast the trail goes cold in the material world because of the onslaught of material nature. If you take a break from what you're doing and don't stay consistent with it, then a lot of other things fill in that place. Just like in gardening, if you just leave a patch of dirt outside, when you come back after a while, you'll find that it's not still a patch of dirt, it's filled up with all kinds of weeds. So we also have to educate ourselves every single day about the process of self-realization. And that can be done by studying the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada writes in the Antya-lila that all the followers of the Krishna consciousness movement have to read all the books. Otherwise, he said, they'll fall down. So this is an indication of the seriousness of the situation here in the material world, that we are up against very powerful forces of material nature, and therefore we have to be consistent in cultivating spiritual knowledge. And we notice it also when we go to teach Krishna consciousness to others, even those who seem very interested, because they're not mature yet, and because they also don't have complete knowledge, and they don't have a consistent connection with the practice. We may see them one Sunday, and then 2 Sundays later, they've decided on a different philosophy. This happens all the time. So someone gets a hold of them, or they pick up some book. I saw this recently when we were traveling overseas. A person who had taken to Krishna consciousness with determination, and then someone said, "Here, read this," and it was a Mayavadi book. And they read the book, and then they just gave up Krishna consciousness. The living entity is subjected to the influence of the material nature in very profound ways, so we have to be consistent in the way that we culture Krishna conscious knowledge. And yes, from 7243. Prabhupada writes in the middle of the purport, according to the reactions of karma, the living entity appears separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually he is very intimately related with the Lord. Consequently, even though we now seem neglected by the Lord, he is actually always alert to our activities. Just wanted you to know that. He's alert to your activities. And there's a parallel to that in 8.3.17 that I want to read you. And once I read you this, it'll make the concept even more clear. And in this verse, Gajendra is praying to the Lord. And he says, since an animal such as I is surrendered unto you, who are supremely liberated, certainly you will release me from this dangerous position. Indeed, being extremely merciful, you incessantly try to deliver me. By your practical feature as Paramatma, you are situated in the hearts of all embodied beings. You are celebrated as direct transcendental knowledge, and you are unlimited. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, in the purport, in the last two paragraphs, Prabhupada writes, only Krishna can deliver us from this material existence. Indeed, he is always trying to deliver us. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridayeshara tishtati. He is within our hearts and is not at all inattentive. His only aim is to deliver us from material life. It is not that he becomes attentive to us only when we offer prayers to him. Even before we offer our prayers, he incessantly tries to deliver us. He is never lazy in regard to our deliverance. Therefore, this verse says, Bhuri Karunaya Namo Yalaya. It is the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord that he always tries to bring us back home, back to Godhead. God is liberated, and he tries to make us liberated. But although he is constantly trying, we refuse to accept his instructions. Sarvadharaman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Nonetheless, he has not become angry. Therefore, he is described here as Buddhi Karunaya, unlimitedly merciful in delivering us from this miserable material condition of life and taking us back home, back to Godhead. How's that sit with you? You liked it? Yes. Yeah, he's always attentive. Priya Kishori.
So this part where even before you try to attempt to pray to the Lord, he already knows what you really need, which is to be delivered from the material existence. And that reminds me of one of his names, which is Vanchatita, which means he can give something more than what you can even ask for. And so that just proves to say he knows us so well from the beginning of time and what we really need, more than we know about ourselves.
Yes, this comes up in the story of Kardama Muni. When Kardama Muni meditates for 10,000 years, and then the Lord appears. In fact, he's so compassionate when he appears that tears come from his eyes out of compassion for the sage. Can you imagine such a thing? It's so beautiful. And now he comes before Kardama Muni and to fulfill his desires. And Kardama opens his eyes, begins to pray to the Lord. And then in the midst of his prayers, he said, like a wife. And the Lord replies, yes, I already know that. And I've already arranged for you, for your wife. And who did he arrange? Devahuti, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. And so Prabhupada points out in the purport, he said, so if you want something, it's better to put it before the Lord, because if you try to arrange it, you'll blow it. But if the Lord arranges it, then it'll be beyond what you can imagine. Devahuti comes, and she's, a princess, and the whole thing's perfectly arranged. So, yes, there will be material desires, but if you leave it to Krishna, that it's up to you. I'll go on serving, but you make whatever arrangement you think is necessary. Then he can make the best arrangement. And this is one of the points about Krishna being omniscient, is that it's not that he's omniscient and therefore everything we do is futile because he is predetermined everything that will happen. But what it means is that he's the best arranger of everything in our life, and he also knows exactly how to deliver us. So it's best if we just take his instruction, and this is the simplicity of devotional service. It simply means surrender. It means understanding this fact that he's the receiver of all sacrifices, that he can reciprocate that he owns everything already, and that he's our best friend. And that if you just surrender to him, then he will make all perfect arrangements. And that becomes quite invigorating. The whole concept of how one can surrender more and more and render more service to Krishna. And then a competition ensues because the devotee just wants to give more to Krishna and Krishna wants to give more to the devotee. But the devotee won't take it. He only wants to surrender. And so Krishna tries to find ways to give more to the devotee. And that's one of the reasons that if you serve the devotees, then you get Krishna's favor. Because he wants to serve the devotees, but they won't accept it from Krishna. They only want to serve and not take. So if you give to the devotees and get them to take it, then Krishna becomes satisfied with you. He gives you special blessings. Okay, so last one I want to point out from 7:2:46. And that is that you have personal prowess. Did you know that? That means you have power. It's important to remember that you have power. You have freedom, and not only do you have freedom, but you also have power. You're agents of change. You can change your life and you can change the world. So in this verse, which reads as follows, the 5 material elements, the 10 senses, and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entity comes in contact with his material bodies, whether high or low, and later gives them up by his personal prowess. This strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different types of bodies. And if you look around the world, you notice this. I see all the time looking out my window at my home, I see birds flying around doing all kinds of stuff. You're like, how do you do that? It's like, I got some power. I'm a living entity. That's what I do. I'm powerful. I can go into different bodies. Living entities are amazing. And so we can remember this, as Prabhupada points out in his purport. The human form of body is valuable. One can use this body to go to the higher planetary systems, to Pitri Loka, or he can remain in this lower planetary system. But if one tries to return home back to Godhead, he can do that. This prowess is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Super Soul. So the word prowess means skill, it means expertise, and it means bravery in battle. And it comes from the French word valiant, which means courage and determination. So that's there within us. We have valiance, we have a prowess as parts and parcels of Krishna. And it's just a matter of how we direct that. If we direct that power, then it's unlimited how much service that we can do and how much positive influence we can have. And not only that, we can go wherever we want to go. If you make up your mind to go somewhere, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Vrta Devan Pitrin Yanti Pratirvata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Mam Yajinopimam, which basically means you can go wherever you want. It's up to you. And if you decide which way you want to go, you can incrementally get there. But especially if you decide that you want to go to Krishna, then Krishna gives all help from within to direct the devotee, even if the person's normally not that smart. That happens to me all the time. I guess that's a sign, isn't it? So we'll just take some last reflections. Yes, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So for before this verse, you talked about like that Krishna will provide everything for the devotee, and the devotee will not take it. But I was just thinking about this verse, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam bhamyam, which means that if you pray to the Lord, that Lord will preserve what you have and give what you lack. So he will. So my understanding was that he would give. First, he would give he would make you learn the Krishna consciousness. He will give you Krishna consciousness, and then he'll preserve it so you don't fall down to the material conditions of life.
Yeah, Ananyas Chintayantama means feel free to be fully absorbed in Krishna. Because when somebody fully takes shelter of Krishna in his consciousness, then Krishna maintains him. Well done, sir. Yes.
With this last verse where you were mentioning prowess, I was immediately reminded of the verse from the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, with determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. I feel that's like a militaristic, verse that displays that we have the prowess and the capacity to relieve ourselves from our own condition. And it gives us a sense of responsibility for our situation, so we take action to change.
I'm feeling it from you right now. Yeah, these are important concepts to remember. Yes.
Maharaj, the previous verse talks about Bhuri Karunaya.
Yes.
And this resonates with Karuna Sindhu. We say Krishna is Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Karuna Sindhu. Krishna is unlimitedly merciful. And Bhagavatam repeatedly says, only a stone cannot surrender to Krishna. So, because I see this is a great point, for surrendering to Krishna, because he's so unlimitedly merciful. Why not surrender to Krishna? What is the problem?
Thank you for reminding us. That's a good point. Once I sat down for prasadam at Govardhan, Burijana Prabhu was sitting next to me. They were just serving out. So he said, "Can I tell you something?" I said, "Please." And he said, 2 points. He said, Krishna is all-powerful and he's all-merciful. And then he said, if he was all-powerful but not all-merciful, then we would be in big trouble. And if he was all-merciful and all-powerful, then what could he do? But he's both. And this is, if one understands this, that he's all-powerful and all-merciful, then this is very compelling. Say, I'll give myself to Krishna. And then one might ask, how do I do that? And that's the beginning of the practice of devotional service. What are the favorable things I can do? One would then go to somebody who has some authority, who's studied the Shastra, and say, please teach me the ways in which I can do this. And that starts the whole process of progress in devotional service in life. You had last ones.
So Maharaj, I was thinking in the context of we having the prowess to move in the material world and go to other planets. I do come across people who express a very strong desire to go to the heavenly planets. Like, I just want to see that kind of stuff. And then I was thinking about your definition and the emphasis about travel, Brahmande Brahmite, that it means travail. And I looked up travail in the dictionary and to find the origin, and it's got a very interesting origin. May I share that with you? So it comes from the Middle English via Old French, from medieval Latin, which means tripalium, and which means instrument of torture.
Instrument of torture.
And from the Latin, tres means three, and palace means stake. So I'm just thinking about, the three, the same thing. The Adhibhautik, Adhidevik, Adhyatmik, and we get all three of them when we are traveling.
Yeah. And there's a famous verse in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, which Shukadeva Goswami says that devotional service is like coming home. For someone who's been traveling and traveling, experiences travail, the instruments of torture, and finally comes home, then feels satisfied. I conceived this mantra that when you travel, you get what you get. When you're home, you get what you want. And you had the last point?
Maharaj, that very nicely you clarify that how sometimes we see that people take Krishna consciousness, or like 1 week they are very very enthusiastic, but then second week we don't see. So you told that they are not sufficiently knowledge and taken to the regular practice, And also you told that even for us not letting the trail go cold is a very wonderful instructions. Even in our Silicon Valley, like many of our here developers, they can appreciate that. One of my senior manager was telling that you should always write 2 lines of code every day, whether anything or not there, you should check in 2 lines of code so that you make the momentum. So
that's right. So true. It's remarkably hard to come back to a cold trail and figure out where you were. This happened to me so many times when I was writing my book because I was doing so many other things. And then, I'd come back and like, why did I write that? Where'd that come from? It would take me half an hour just to figure out why I wrote that and go back and then finally, get in the zone where you can write something. That's when Keshav Bharati Maharaj, after a while, he just said, Vaish, you got to stop doing everything else and be fully concentrated in this to do it. And similarly, Krishna recommends this for our lives also. Come to the point where you're fully concentrated on your devotional service. And if you let it go cold, it stands to reason it's very natural that you'll be go in a different direction and something else will fill those spaces. And then you'll have to struggle to get back to where you were. It's easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. So it's better to stay on a high platform and continue on that platform every day. And then just ride out the whole thing until, you have to leave your body. Just do that. Om Tat Sat. Gaur Premanande Haribo. So now we're going to have Guru Puja. We're going to worship His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada as the representative of Srila Vyasadeva and the founder of our Krishna Consciousness movement. So we'll put away all the seats and we'll stand up for Artik. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.